This episode of the Lloyd'sList podcast is brought to you by Lloyd's Register. Visit lr.org for more information. Should you wish to list all of the various risks, roadblocks, unresolved problems and known challenges ahead for the shipping industry, you're going to need a long piece of paper, and ideally some medical assistance on standby, because this is not a task for the faint of heart or those of a nervous disposition. You might want to start with some of the old favourites, supply chain instability, for example, or barriers to trade, or administrative burdens on an industry that is ill-equipped to deal with them. Cyber risk, protectionism, the rise of the dark fleet, seafarer training, recruitment, autonomy. The list just goes on and on and on. But given the geopolitical upheaval that now threatens to blow up quite literally on a daily basis, the risk hotlist is looking spicier than usual this year. So, how do we deal with this growing to-do list from hell? How is it possible for such a fragmented industry to tackle decarbonisation and digitalisation amid a fracturing geopolitical framework, on top of the business-as-usual risk that threatens to scupper the best-laid plans of those who carry global trade on a daily basis? Well, I thought I would ask those poor unsung heroes, the ones who we entrust with the list of doom, the ship owners' representatives. And before you switch off thinking this is just another 20 minutes of gloom, just stay with me for a little longer, because I am admittedly shining a spotlight on a long list of issues keeping the industry awake at night. But I am also of the opinion that the shipping industry's ability to deal with those problems has never been greater. Shipping's post-COVID, post-ever-given public profile has never been more visible, but more importantly, the industry's political capital is at an all-time high. So this week, I'm talking to the European Community Shipowners Association, the Singapore Shipowners Association, and the International Chamber of Shipping about what's on their agenda and what they see as the greatest challenges and solutions for shipping. Strap in, you're about to get a rapid global tour of the entire shipping industry this week. And given that I'm here in London, I'm going to start in Europe, where we have a new European Commission about to get going and some big plans on the table to boost productivity and basically overhaul the entire European economy. But we also have an awful lot of regulatory challenges for shipping specifically in the form of emissions trading, but also the Fuel EU maritime legislation that's about to start biting. So here's Sotiris Raptis, Secretary-General of ECSA.
What we have seen since the election, in fact before the election, is awareness about the fact that as Europeans we're lagging behind in competition towards other jurisdictions in the world, towards the US, towards China. And it has been very high on the agenda how to improve the competitiveness of the European economy. In fact, this doesn't contradict the climate targets. It goes hand in hand with the climate targets. There is a general awareness that pushing for clean technologies, for the uptake of clean fuels and clean technologies, is the new battlefield of international competition. We've seen when the new president, the re-elected president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, when she delivered her inauguration speech to the European Parliament in July, she mentioned that we're going to stick to the current climate targets, but we need to turn the European Green Deal to an ambitious industrial policy. She called it the new European Clean Industrial Deal. We want to see shipping under this overarching policy. We want to push for an ambitious maritime industrial strategy. At the same time, we need to make clear to all the policymakers that we cannot have an ambitious industrial strategy or an ambitious and thriving and strong maritime industrial cluster in Europe without strong and international competitive shipping. This has been reflected especially in the Draghi report, which was published today. We're really happy to see a clear link between a regulatory and level playing field at the international level with the competitiveness of European shipping.
I'm just going to pause there briefly for the non-Europeans listening who may not be quite as in the weeds of EU policy as some of us. The Draghi report that Sotiris is referencing there is the long-awaited plan to stem European economic decline. It was published this week by the former central bank president Mario Draghi. Basically, it sets out a clear case for massive generational investment, with a headline requirement of around 800 billion euros in terms of a spending spree on clean energy, high-tech innovation and economic resilience. That, as you will now hear, is important for shipping because the maritime sector is finally being seen as part of this EU Green Industrial Plan. Anyway, back to Sotiris.
In fact, the report calls European shipping a success story. And it makes sense. European shipping has been a cornerstone of Europe's energy, food and supply chain security, but this wasn't recognized in the past, at least with such strong language. The reason why the Draghi report is really important for us is that the findings and recommendations of the report will be reflected on the new agenda of the European Commission. These findings and these recommendations will be in the job description, the so-called mission letters of the Commission's designate. The European Parliament will scrutinize the new commissioners in the hearings next month on the basis of this job description. And we're really happy to see that shipping is also recognized as one of the two most difficult to decarbonize sectors of the European economy, next to aviation. The report found that we're going to miss 40 billion euros for shipping alone annually for the energy transition. This is really serious stuff, and it puts in the spotlight the big question, where the money will come from.
Where the money will come from is just one of many problems with the recommendations coming out of the Draghi report, which we don't have time to go into in this podcast. But the reason I was talking to Sotiris about this is because the European agenda is quite specific and doesn't necessarily always align with other competing international agendas. In fact, we are seeing an increasing divergence between European industrial policy, American industrial policy, and Asian industrial policy, specifically in China. But shipping is not operating in a regulatory or commercial sphere in isolation. So how does shipping, the most international of industries, deal with that fragmentation?
We should probably zoom out again and look at the overall competitiveness policy of China, of the US, of Europe, of other jurisdictions internationally. I don't think that these different policies are not aligned. They are clearly competing. Different countries are trying hard to support the competitiveness of their own industry, but no one is investing in fossil fuels. It's clear what is the battlefield. The battlefield is the uptake of clean technologies. It's how to support the uptake of clean fuels, clean technologies. This is going to be key for our industry. This is where we have seen, for instance, again, zoom out, the European car makers to lag behind in terms of competitiveness. And this is what we should insist as European ship owners. We are the front line of the green transition, and it's not necessarily about the ship owners here. It's about how to make the technologies available in Europe and the clean fuels available in Europe. And this is where we support the ambitious clean industrial deal for the shipping sector as well. To conclude, I can't see any huge divergence in terms of objectives. Of course, different countries use different tools. For instance, the Americans came up with the IRA, and with not only with subsidies for the uptake of technologies and fuels, but also with tax breaks. Sure that this will be the case for the Europeans. But we have seen the Draghi report. We have seen ideas floating around. From our perspective, we want to have an open discussion how to improve access to adequate finance. Without private finance, we won't be able to make it, and we need also to see an enormous increase in public investments. We need to see clean fuels and clean technologies available in the market.
The maritime industry is facing a pivotal challenge: decarbonising the existing fleet. To address this, Lloyd's Register has been evaluating what this means for shipping stakeholders. Lloyd's Register's Engine Retrofit Report provides a comprehensive overview of fleet and technology readiness to transition to alternative fuels, including methanol and ammonia. This report considers the primary regulatory drivers, shipyard retrofit capacity and capability, as well as the importance of human factors and training. You can download the report at www.lr.org/ERR.
Okay, let's move continents and get another perspective, this time from Asia, via Caroline Yang, the president of the Singapore Shipowners Association.
I have been in shipping for 35 years and I have never felt this set of onslaught of challenges that I'm feeling now for our shipping industry. So I think really at the top of our mind now is very immediate, and that is of course the Red Sea situation, and that is the safety of the crew and the security of the ship. And we can't seem to get out of this, and we are just managing it. And now you see that most of the ships are going by the Cape of Good Hope, and that takes another 2 weeks, and that drives up the emissions. And we are supposed to be, as an industry, to come in and solve this. So that is really, really worrying us as an industry, because it is really the safety of the seafarers, and we are already facing a shortage, and something like that with that publicity is just not good for us. So that's one. And then, of course, the protectionism that is rising, and that will affect our trade and how our ships will travel. And with this US, China, and the unilateral decisions that is taken by so many governments that think that perhaps is this an opportunity to try and raise funds for themselves for the decarbonisation, and as shipping, because ships move from port to port, region to region, we need a very certain set of regulations, and we cannot be penalised going from port to port. It will just drive up the costs, and that will be passed on to the consumers. So this protectionism, the safety of our seafarers is really worrying. On the medium term, is really the kind of ships that we have to build, because we don't want to be left with stranded assets. And as a ship owner, that really worries me. What kind of ships do I build? I've been in this business for 35 years, and I will tell you that at a certain point in time, we really go into new buildings because we need to replace the fleet. The fleet gets older. But as a company now, I'm hesitating to go into new buildings because I'm not quite sure what kind of fuels that is going to be there in the future. Of course, many bigger ship owners are building dual fuel vessels, and it seems to be the right thing to do. You hedge your bets. But then again, that becomes too expensive. And also for the crew, they have to learn how to manage two different types of fuel. So there is a lot of challenges for the shipping industry. I can go on, even ship financing. I feel that in the past, the ship financiers have always been the one that is supporting us. We are the brick and mortar of the economy. I mean, we are the industry. We build the ships we want and that we need, and then they finance us. But now the ship financiers are telling us what to build. And I'm just wondering if they have the expertise to know what we need and dictating these regulations on us. I'm not quite sure how it works. So we need to work together with the ship financiers because we need them on board on this green transition.
Now, I said at the outset that despite the fearsome size of the to-do list that shipping is grappling with, that the industry's ability to deal with it has never been greater. And I mention that because both Satiris and Caroline were this week attending the annual meeting of the International Chamber of Shipping, the point at which shipowners associations gather to discuss the international view. And generally speaking, these representatives of the industry are sounding pretty positive right now.
I also actually see the good part of it is that the industry is coming together. Although we are fragmented, if I see how ICS has progressed in the last 5 years, I feel that as an industry, we are discussing our views, and we are coming up with consensus and the positions that we want to take, because we know that we have to stand together as an industry. So I like that.
That point about a united industry representation sounds like a pretty obvious one, but the reality is it's not always been the case. This is a fragmented series of sectors represented by an alphabet soup of constituent bodies, and the industry has often lacked a unified voice on the big issues of the day. According to the Secretary-General of the International Chamber of Shipping, Guy Platten, that's a situation that has at least now started to improve.
So we've made a conscious effort in ICS to, of course, IMO is a focus and we have a lot of resources dedicated to that, but we're increasingly trying to put shipping's case to outside, to other, whether it's energy ministries, whether to the wider society as well, because COVID was a bad time for our seafarers. But the one thing I'd say, it did raise shipping's profile like nothing ever before. And we've seen that, with, even a ship stuck in the Suez Canal, people realised actually shipping is important. And so I think, to me, it's getting that message out there. And we're increasingly putting resource into doing that, because shipping has a role to play, whether it's in decarbonisation. It's speaking to an energy minister. Great that you've signed an off-take agreement with Germany for your hydrogen. How are you going to get it from your country to Germany? So we need to engage with shipping now. And I think we've always hid our light under a bushel a little bit, and we've always been quite inward-looking and just not wanted to make any waves. But I think increasingly now we realise we've actually got to stand up and actually say we're quite proud of what we do as an industry. Our safety record is much better than it ever used to be. How many oil spills do you really see in the world today? Very, 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 very few. Our welfare of our seafarers. I'm personally proud that we're the only global industry which has an international convention governing the rights of workers. I mean, that's pretty progressive stuff. So we need to build on that. And I think as I see the world starting to fracture a little bit, I think shipping is still very international. You go all over the world. You speak to people all over the world, and shipping is a common language.
Of course, if we're talking about shipping's big list of challenges, we can't ignore the biggest, the Uber challenge, the generational question that pervades everything, decarbonisation. What Sotiris is tackling in Europe and Caroline is working on in Asia all culminates over the next 2 major meetings inside the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, where the agenda will be set on a global basis for shipping. So, how's Guy feeling about progress as we're just weeks away from the next MEPC session?
I do feel, speaking to member states, that some pragmatism is now starting to creep in. People will still have their positions, but you do feel that there's a gradually coming together of those positions, but you won't see it at the next meeting. It'll all be behind the scenes in the coffee rooms and all the rest of it. Things will be slowly starting to move. And so you're right, absolutely. This meeting is critical, not because it'll produce anything, but it will set very much the scene for the end game, which is going to be next March. Because I spoke to the Secretary-General of IMO, I've been with him quite a few times over the last few weeks, funnily enough, and he does really believe that we'll reach a successful conclusion to all of these. And I can only hope that's going to be the case, because it's that uncertainty. How can ship owners plan when they don't have you just don't know what ships you're going to be looking to build? So I think removing that uncertainty, whatever it is, will be a good thing. We're reaching that point now where we're going to have to try and live with the decisions that are made. Ultimately, it'll be member states will be agreeing, governments will be agreeing what the way forward is. And all we can hope, and the plea I've made to the Secretary-General of the IMO is, whatever's agreed, we've put forward our own proposal, which we do truly believe in, but whatever's agreed has to be something that can be enacted by industry and not something which is so difficult and complex and impossible to navigate through. So I think those messages are landing as well.
Well, I promised you a whistle-stop international tour through the industry's agenda, and while we only scratched the surface in the time available, I hope it's given you at least some food for thought this week. My thanks to Guy, Sotiris and Caroline for taking the time to talk to me this week in between their busy schedule of meetings. Thank you also again to Lloyd's Register, who have sponsored this week's edition. Visit lr.org for more information. And thank you, as ever, for listening. We will be back next week with more of the stories shaping shipping, but for now, goodbye and stay safe out there. Cheers.